Hello, and welcome to the Zero to Hired podcast, the show that helps struggling job seekers find a career that's right for you. In every episode, we have one mission: to provide you with unique tips and strategies from leading industry experts that will get you in front of hiring managers. Enjoy the show.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Zero to Hired podcast. Our special guest this week is Stephanie Clark. Stephanie Clark launched her own new career when she opened up her business in 2007. Not really aspiring to be a business owner, the spark that spurred Stephanie to establish New Leaf Resumes was her gift for the written word. Having discovered a real love for the crisp, lean style of business writing, she stumbled on the craft of resume writing. Newly certified within a scant year, Stephanie earned recognition with 4 awards of excellence, as well as having her work selected for inclusion in a U.S. career publication. Stephanie's resumes continue to earn her accolades. She has since earned 2 master-level certifications, a total of 9 awards from the Career Professionals of Canada, an award from the U.S.-based Emerald Career Publications. You'll find Stephanie's resumes and letters in a variety of career books that you might find at Chapters in your local library or career centers. I believe in the power of the written word, she says, which can be powerfully good or equally bad depending on the writer's skill. Welcome, Stephanie, who is about to inspire you to use words wisely, strategically to cut through the recruitment process. Her tactics will equip you with the resume that lands interviews, perfect for introverts for whom networking is not an effective job search strategy. Stephanie, please welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, John. I'm pleased to be here.
And we're very excited. This is a really interesting topic for us. You know, we're going to be discussing resumes specifically for introverts, for all those people out there that are really struggling to get through that process. And we're going to go through and even look at how you optimize the resume for the ATS and also speak to the hiring manager at the same time. So I'm really excited to have you on the show.
Thanks, John.
So, Stephanie, let's just go back a little bit and let's just rewind. How did this all get started for you?
Well, I'm glad that you asked, because it's quite a good story. I spent much of my career years floundering and going from one kind of job to another. I did everything from making bagel sandwiches at a bagel bar to managing a large retail store, and everything in between. I've worked in a factory as a young woman between years at school and in a daycare center. I mean, I have done a lot of things. I was a supply teacher for a while. And I've also been fired a few times, not for cause, but just because the fit wasn't there. So I can really relate to my clients. When I hit about 45, I thought, well, what do I want to be when I grow up? Because it was time to do that. And, you know, I'd always had this little voice in my head that said, you should write, you want to write. But for some reason, I was equating the word writing with writing a novel, which I can't do. Mm-hmm. A counselor I went to once said, why don't you look online and see if there's any writing courses online so that you could try something out. The only thing I could find was a business writing certificate through OntarioLearn.com, which lists all the different courses available to us through the various colleges in Ontario. Business writing. I thought, well, okay, at least it's something. I'll take it. I loved it and I excelled in it. I loved the idea of, you know, really lean and crisp writing. I have a knack for it. It confounds me a little bit because business writing seems to mean that you are business savvy, but I am not particularly business savvy. I'm very artistic, actually. But I think this ability to write lean with the creative aspect that I bring to my work that's what propelled me to earn the first series of awards in my first year. So by the time I was 50, I had gotten this business writing certificate, and I had found Career Professionals of Canada. I had taken their certificate in resume as a resume strategist, and I just hit the ground running. I had a lot of skills and experience under my belt, so to speak, by that point, so I wasn't a newbie trying to figure things out. And as far as owning my own business, I'm not an entrepreneur, but I'm extremely self-disciplined. When I focus, I focus. The world could be crashing down around me, and I'm not even aware of it. So that helped me in terms of running a business, even though I'm not business savvy per se. And that's how I got into resume writing.
Well, I don't know. It sounds like you're pretty business savvy to me if you're doing all this work and still keeping your head about you and still able to deliver, right? And
Well,
that's
yeah, I think you are right. I mean, when it comes to owning a business, you have to wear many hats. You have to do the accounting. You have to figure out what the government wants from you. You have to sell when clients call. You have to manage client expectations and so on. Having resources for them, handouts that help them with typical questions like how do I choose my references and
Mhm.
how do I prepare them and so on. I've got all that. I've done all that. I think that I have probably more talents than I sort of acknowledge, and as I say, I focus. I'm self-disciplined. I do it. I do what needs to be done. Yes.
Excellent.
Yeah.
So you've touched on a lot of good things. Actually, there was a resource in there. You talked about Ontario Learning. So this is
OntarioLearn.com. Yes.
OntarioLearn.com, and that's a
Mhm.
resource where people can find out about available courses out for them.
Yes, online courses,
Okay.
which is great for anyone who maybe has kids at home and really can't get out to their local community college once or twice a week in the evenings, but they can certainly sit down as I did at the computer every Sunday morning while everyone's still sleeping and take your course.
Yeah. No, this is fantastic. I didn't even know such a thing existed. So this is great. So these are for all those people out there that are in the midst of just transition and they're looking to do something a little bit different, but they're still lacking those skills, right?
Yes.
The
Hmm.
actual skills to move forward. So this is a great resource in there. So I'm definitely going to make sure that I include the link in the show notes so people can get a copy of it or click on it and find
Great.
that resource for themselves.
Yeah.
And so you got into this, you started winning your accolades. You've got, you're a member of the Canadian Career Professionals doing strategic resume writing. So we're going to talk specifically around writing resumes for the introverts today. So
Mhm.
how does that start? So how do you get lean and crisp? Like, do you start your resume with the lean and crisp format, or like, what's the process that you typically work through as you're putting this together?
No, the lean and crisp comes from writing style and
Okay.
removing redundancies and really considering every word. If I have a bullet that's 2.25 lines, I'm going to try really hard to get it down to 2 lines. And
Hmm.
certainly if I have an orphan word, one little word on a second or third line, it's got to go. Since 2007, I've actually only had one resume where I had a one-word line that I absolutely couldn't shorten it anymore, and there was nothing else that needed to be added. So I remember that distinctly because I do value resume real estate. It's really expensive. You've got 1 or 2 pages, and most recruiters don't want to see more than that. So we've got to stay crisp. But writing a resume for introvert is really more about the fact that an introvert is not going to necessarily get out there and network, meeting
Hmm.
people, reaching out, cold calling, all that. I'm an introvert. That's why I work at home by myself most of the time. I regenerate on my own. I need my own space to be productive. And even for me to network can be quite difficult. People reach out to me, and I'm very friendly and open and certainly willing. And but to reach out and network is really difficult. I'm not good at cold calling or that sort of thing. And so I fully understand that, and I think perhaps somehow that comes through my website, because I do get a lot of people who are introverts, and when they hear that they don't have to network to land a job interview, they're flabbergasted and they're thrilled. And it all has to do with the content of the resume.
Okay.
Today's resume, in order to be effective, has to speak to two audiences. It has to speak to the applicant tracking software, which is the system that many, many employers now use to parse and evaluate submissions because they've got, hundreds sometimes. It Using these applicant tracking software systems has reduced the need for additional HR manpower, so it makes a great deal of sense economically to an employer.
Hmm.
It also increases the transparency of the hiring process. If you have a name that, um, that somebody you knew when you were a kid was named Rita or something, and she was mean to you, and so you have this subconscious bias against people named Rita or a man named Ron or something, right? That won't come into play. And if you have an international name, that won't come into play. The ATS, it simply evaluates based on content and context. It doesn't interpret anything. It doesn't have a bias. So it has a lot of pluses to using it, but there are also minuses to using it because most people honestly don't know what it means to write a resume that is ATS optimized.
Mm. Okay, so that's interesting. Well, first of all, I would have never thought you were introvert based on just having our conversation. So, kudos to you to not making it look like And I guess when I think about it, introverts, like, you can still be a highly successful person and still be an introvert, and
Oh,
that's
absolutely.
and I think there's this
Yeah.
misconception out there that if you're an introvert, then you can't be out there, you can't be successful, and you can't do all these great things. And you kind of, you yourself defy all that. You're highly successful in your field and the work that you do. So, for all the introverts that are listening, yes, there's a lot of hope out there for you. Don't give up. You'll get to where you're going to get to.
Oh, absolutely. And although I'm not good in the event, you plunk me in a room with a whole bunch of people and I'm the wallflower. But you put me in front of the room to speak and I
Hmm.
love it. So,
Yeah.
there are obviously kind of contradictory aspects to introversion. Some people go more this way, some that more that way. There's probably many versions of introversion.
Yeah, actually, and I think about myself for a second, and I was like you. I struggled with the networking events and just connecting with people in a live event. But put me in front of a room, not a problem. I can speak to the entire room. It was just easier, and it actually took, for me, I actually put conscious effort in trying to reverse it and really be able to do those one-to-one conversations because I know there's a lot of value in those, and I felt
Mhm,
like I was leaving a lot at the table by not having those conversations with people in the room. So,
mhm.
there's different ways to do it, and you can do it through your work, which is what you're doing, and you can also learn it as well. So this is great. So
Yes.
you talked about the applicant tracking system and writing your resume for both, and this is interesting because I want to figure out, and I'm sure the audience is really interested in figuring out, how do you do that? How do you start? Like, where do you, if you're laying out your resume, where do you start at the top, and then what's the
Okay.
ending start to look like as you're putting it
Sure.
together?
Sure. So I'll just step back to that most people or many job hunters still don't know exactly what it means to how to work around this applicant tracking software, the
Hmm.
computerized recruitment process. And to that end, actually, this year it seems that recruiters and job hunters are really cottoning on to this applicant tracking software and the need to understand it better. Because earlier this year, I presented to a division of our Department of National Defense
Mm.
on the applicant tracking system for the spouses of the people that are serving our country.
Oh wow.
Because they move around a lot. Every 2, 3 years, they're in a different town or city looking for another job, right?
Yeah.
So that they need to know about it. And also in September, I'm presenting to Communitech, which is a job seekers group in Kitchener-Waterloo on the applicant tracking system. So when I start laying out the resume, I'm putting in mind the fact that these ATS have certain formatting requirements. There's quite a long list, but for example, you do not want to use any headers or footers, at least not to put important information in. You can certainly put the page number if you wish, but don't put your name and your contact information in a header
Mm.
or footer. They're not able to evaluate that information in there. Also, don't put your name and contact information in the text box. They're not able to read a text box.
Wow,
The
that's
applicant,
interesting.
yeah,
Yeah,
applicant.
because there's a lot of people
Mhm.
that do that. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but
No, that's okay.
I think about the standard resume, and everybody drops everything into the header and to the footer, right?
Yeah, because they think they're saving room and then they'll have more room for the rest of the content. And I
Okay.
had one client, I had sent him, he was an international client immigrating to Canada and in IT. And I had sent him his resume that I wrote. And he said, I made a few changes. Can you have a look at it? So I looked at it. The first thing I saw was he had taken his name and contact information, put it into a header. So I immediately wrote him back and said, no, please stop. This because they can't read it. And then they say, oh, it's software. It just says, oh, there's no contact information out. So you're
Wow.
completely,
Okay.
yeah, you've lost big marks there. So you have to be aware of that. It cannot read complicated things. Use Word. Do not use a template that you find online. That template may have embedded features into it that may not be compatible with the ATS. I don't know which ones do and don't. I'm not sure how you can tell,
Hmm.
but this is the way it works. And where I have gotten my information, John, is amazing. I took a 2-part webinar from an American woman who went to the source. She went not to the manufacturer of the ATS, to their sales department, but to the programmers that manufacture, that program these ATS for the manufacturer. The
Wow.
programmers told her, here's how it's configured, here's how it's set up to read a resume.
Are those programmers still working?
Yes, they are, because it shouldn't be a secret at all. It
Yeah,
should
yeah,
be
because
public knowledge.
they've given away they've given away the keys to the chest, right? Like it's.
Well, yes, but this is what job seekers need to know. And why would
Mhm.
a company not want the job seeker to know that? What happened, I think, is that companies didn't take into account the fact that, hey, if we want to know who the best applicants are, they actually have to know how these ATS things work.
Yeah, actually,
And so,
it's an
yeah, I'm
interesting way
on
to
a bit
look
of
at
a
it.
mission to educate the public, our Canadian public, on it, because I think it's very unfair, really unfair. So those lovely infographic resumes, that's great to hand out to someone, but
Yeah.
it will not get parsed through the ATS. It'll just be completely thrown out. It won't know what to make out of it.
Yeah, the infographic, and I've seen executives use it to highlight numbers and to show, how they've been able to transform organizations that they've worked with.
Hmm.
But yeah, you definitely don't want to put that through an ATS because
No,
that all
it's
gets.
great for networking.
Yeah.
Absolutely, hand it out or email it directly to a person, but not in a submission to to a job posting. And so from that's how I begin. I start with fresh Word document and start populating it, um, creating it from scratch myself.
Okay.
Then the second thing you have to remember after all the different, and I've only touched on the formatting, there are a lot more considerations. Then you go to that keyword phrase aspect. The ATS have a voracious appetite for keywords, and they will actually score and mark and evaluate your resume based on keywords and keyword phrases taken from the job posting. So the software is really relying on that job posting that you're applying to. It's up to every job hunter then, especially the introverts who don't want to have to network, who want their resume to land them interviews. They need to go through the job posting, highlight the hard skills associated with that job. So not the soft skills about your personality and your character traits and your work ethic and so on. It's about those hard skills, like um, for an admin assistant would be the use of a Word and
Hmm.
Excel and data entry and access. For an IT professional, it's going to have to do with networks and hardware and software and those sorts of things. So each role has its set of hard skills that go with it. Find the ones in that job posting and see how you can integrate that into your resume. You want to put those keywords in your summary or profile because in that first summary or profile, you've got to impress upon not the ATS so much, but the human reader that you are perfect for this job or close to it. Tell them exactly perhaps how many years you have in the experience they're looking for, or what kinds of organization, large organization, or if you're a new grad, that's fine. A new grad from this and this program with knowledge of such and such, up to date knowledge of such and such. Very often they'll have a section in the job posting that is really like a template for you to use to populate your summary section. It's where they give you an overview of that position in 2 or 3 sentences. See
Sorry.
what.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So sorry. Which section was that again?
Well, it's not always titled in the job posting, but it's
Okay.
where they give you an overview in
Okay.
2 or 3 sentences of what they expect from you. You have to be truthful, of course, so you
Of course.
only integrate language that is truthful to you. But what can you tell them about your experience, your skills, your knowledge of that area of what they're looking for? So it's integrating those keywords and keyword phrases throughout your bullets in a list of skill sets, if you like. Um, and you can find examples of resumes in books like Best Canadian Resumes, that's put out by CPC, by our executive director, Sharon Graham.
Yeah.
And they'll have sort of, I'm going to call them templates, but I don't mean prefab templates. I just mean they give you an outline of how the profile and the list of skills and then the professional experience and so on, how to lay that out.
Okay.
Yeah.
So actually, I want to go back and you touched on keywords and phrases. And,
Mhm.
the one thing when I think about job description, I kind of think of them as grocery lists. The most
Mhm.
important items are always at the top, and then there's things throughout. What's your take on the number of times something shows up in a job description?
Mhm.
Those are, kind of walk through that a little bit.
Yes, yeah. So
And
let's say the word strategic shows up 10 times in a job posting. You want to make sure that you're using it more than once or twice in your resume
okay.
because some keywords are weighted more heavily than others. We don't know which, we're not privy to that information. There can also be knockout things. So if you don't have something, if the company is completely focused on the fact that anybody in management has to have a degree and you do not, then that company, you'll get knocked out by that one thing if that's something that they've mandated. But don't despair because there are plenty of companies that don't have that kind of mandate. So
Yeah.
we can't please everyone. There's no way around that. But there's almost always a strategy, no matter what your potential obstacle to being included in the interview is, there almost always is a way to get over it, around it, or through it. Yeah.
So
Um,
yeah, no, so this is good. So in terms of obstacles, so when a job description, so uh, just so I could recap, uh,
mhm.
so if the organization is looking for a certain level of education and you don't have that level of education, then maybe the thing is to just move on to another application.
No, because you don't know if that company has mandated that that is an absolute must-have. If it says must-have, then yeah, you can probably interpret that as let's move on to something else because
Oh,
it's a
okay.
lot of work to tweak your resume, tailor it,
Hmm.
curate it for the job posting. So you don't want to be wasting your time on ones. But if it's nice to have or as just listed as a qualification but doesn't say must have, then it's still a possibility that that's just kind of a nice to have. But I've had, for example, a director of IT, more than one, who has gotten into his or her role, climbing up the career ladder, really never had any formal training in IT at all, just on the job. And
Hmm.
then they were let go because the reorganization, downsizing, so on, let go. And 20 years after being with the same company, they're all of a sudden facing this challenge, this potential hurdle of, hey, I don't have a degree in computer sciences. But once, as long as the content of your resume, and this is where we get into the influencing the people, the readers, the recruiters, and HR and hiring managers, if your resume content has enough context in it that it demonstrates your performance, your productivity, and by the dotted line how it affects the profits for the company, then the fact that you don't have that degree becomes it's nothing.
Hmm.
If you've got facts to back up the fact that you bring great value to this position and to the company, then that one little point all of a sudden becomes quite inconsequential.
So how do you do that? How do you work the facts into your resume?
You have to become, you have to look at yourself a little objectively, which is sometimes difficult. You cannot have a resume that reads like a job description or a job posting.
Hmm.
You must customize that resume to say, let's say it's a project manager. Every project manager has a little different, but you can count it. Well, how many large projects a year do I do? How many small? How many different divisions am I liaising with to get this stuff done? What kinds of ideas did I bring to the table to improve a process that seemed to be stumbling at one place all the time? What kind of courses have I taken to make sure that I have kept my skills and knowledge up to date? How have I brought what I learned in those courses into my work? What kinds of performance reviews have I had? What do they say about me? All of these things are fodder for bullets. Recognized in performance reviews for blah, blah, blah. Or even if it's verbal, recognized repeatedly by my manager for blah, blah, blah. you
Oh,
know, so these are the kinds of things that will prove you are who you say you are and that what kind of value you're bringing. Quite often it has to do with kind of defining your own methodology. How do I do these things? What? How do I do it? I love sending people to strengthsfinder.com.
okay.
It's an evaluation of strengths run by Gallup. And Gallup has been collecting data they were the first sort of data aggregators decades. And in a short 20-minute series of questions, you'll get a report. I believe it's $19.95 US, about $25 Canadian, worth its weight in gold, I tell you, because very often people cannot define, why am I good at this? If you're a salesperson, you just, you figure you were just born with this. Well, yes, you were born with certain strengths that lend you to being either a great salesperson or a great project manager or a great writer. So knowing what your strengths are, you can then articulate uh, with confidence and with specific language. They've got great language in there that you can use in your resume or in an interview setting to define, for the person why you're so good at this. What is it you're bringing to the table? What is it that makes you great at this? And they can expect to see it on the job. There are so many ways, John, of selling yourself, creative
Wow.
ways that people don't think of. And I'm telling you, sometimes I think that I sit on this secret that is so difficult to explain to people. Oh, I can teach people and I can do it for them, like how to make that resume sing their praises without boasting at all, just facts. But it's knowing, how to cut through the weeds, just to find that flower that's there. It's knowing how to get through to those nuggets of gold that each person has. It doesn't matter if I've actually interviewed 3 people for the very same job. Each of those 3 resumes was completely different, of course, in appearance, but also, more importantly, in content,
Hmm.
because each person came from a different background, had different strengths, had different things, accomplishments to show why they're good at what they do. Completely different.
Yeah.
It's just amazing to me. I really, it's fascinating to see how these things can grow and evolve and really. The best compliment a person can give me is when they see it and they say, "Wow, I had to read that 2 or 3 times before I believed it was me."
Yeah. I,
Yeah,
c- I could totally see that happening. It's like, wow, that's really me on paper.
yeah, yeah. Then they're thrilled and excited to start their job search because now they've got confidence. They know what their value is.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah. So, wow. Okay. So great. So I'm going to make sure I include the link, the
strengths finder.
strengthfinders, yeah, .com. And
Yeah,
so, so, and I'm guessing this happens for a few people where they really, so now that you've taken the resume and, the disbelief is like, okay, that's really me.
yeah.
How do you connect them mentally to the content that you've written down? Because I can see that being a challenge, and I'm sure some of the audience members are thinking this. It's one thing to be this on paper; it's another thing to be this in person. And
Ah,
how do you
so
can
okay.
and how do you
Yeah,
connect the two?
yeah. Well, I think because when we base so much of it on their innate strengths, their methodology, their
Hmm.
motivation, I ask tons of questions. My homework, the questionnaire, is quite comprehensive. It's not just a 1-hour homework questionnaire. They
Mhm.
really have to know themselves, get to know themselves. I want them to talk to people and ask, what do you think of me? Like, how would you evaluate my work in that project? They need to know the value they bring through other people's eyes as well, which is often a really useful exercise because too many times we see what we did wrong and we focus on that and we obsess about it rather than seeing, hey, what we did right. I remember telling one coworker, you are the epitome of professionalism. You're always calm, even tempered, polite to people. You've got great ideas to share. And she said, really? Inside, I'm so nervous. you know, so I think they can connect to it because it's authentic to them. I don't
Mhm.
make anything up. It's all very authentic. They can see it. And then I can help them learn to articulate it even better through interview coaching. So once I had gotten the resume writing, I realized that I loved the whole career um, sphere because it's something I didn't know when I was young. And oh my gosh, where would I have gotten to had I known it, had I been empowered with this knowledge?
Yes.
So uh, yeah, I wanted to teach people, how to interview better and how to really communicate that value in an authentic way and in a persuasive manner without boasting.
Mm, yeah. So the methodology that you walk people through has to be there's got to be a lot of self-reflection as they're doing this work, and I can
Yeah.
imagine there's going to be a couple of points where you're going to disagree with yourself, or you're going to get angry or upset. You know, what's your recommendation to get over those things, to get over? And maybe it's I don't know if it's self-talk or if it's just those little voices inside your head that's saying, "Well, that's not really you. Why are you putting yourself out there?" How do you like mentally get over those mindsets? Like, how do
I
you get
never
over it?
had anyone come back and say anything like that because my
Really?
language is very toned down. I
Okay.
don't use any adjectives to inflate anything. There's no embellishment. It's all really lean and crisp writing, right? So
Yeah.
I don't use the word very. I don't use the word all. It's small things like that. It's extremely factual. It's
Yeah.
extremely business. I'm creating a business case, really. That's what I'm doing. And
Wow.
the
Okay.
profile is the summary of the business case, and the proof is in the bullets and under all the positions. And so I'm really building a business case, and then the summary is kind of in the cover letter.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. I would have never thought of it that way. I would have never seen it as, when I think about a resume, I think of it as an introduction of yourself to an organization or to a hiring manager. I would have never thought of it as a business case. Wow, that's a
Yeah.
unique perspective, right?
Yeah, that's pretty much what it is.
So you touched on so it's your business case. So you talked about the cover letter. So what's the cover letter in this whole process?
Oh, the cover letter. I just adore writing cover letters because, the resume is a very stilted kind of language. It's clipped and it's cut. It doesn't have pronouns and it doesn't have articles and it starts with verbs. And, it's really got this cadence to it. But you get to the cover letter and you can let loose a little bit. I
Hmm.
have been known to use the word namaste as
Wow.
at
Okay.
the end of a letter. It works for some people. If you're applying to that kind of company, that resonates with that language. There's absolutely no reason you can't say that. I've definitely used the word love in the cover letter. If you love to do something and that is you authentically, then
Wow.
go right
Okay.
ahead and use it. It's not a business letter, it is a self marketing letter. It's a bit of a sales pitch, right?
Mhm.
So, in fact, I had the loveliest compliment just last week from a client who's an executive, and he said, Stephanie, he says, for a guy who normally does not like cover letters, I'm kind of surprised at how much I like mine. So, the cover letter should not just be a sort of synopsis of the resume. No, you've got to pull things together in a different way. And again, a great resource would be the Best Canadian Cover Letters put out by Career Professionals of Canada. I believe there's a new update coming out at the end of this year, I think so. And
Okay.
I've got my sample cover letters in there, as well as in Modernize Your Job Search Letters and one of the editions of cover letters, no, job search letters for dummies. Um, there's lots of resources out there to give you some ideas, but you want to steer clear of those ones that are too business-like. That, for some places that really works, and some people that really works. If that is authentic to that person is extremely business-like and formal in his or her communication, it's authentic to them, that's the way I'd write it. But for many of us, it doesn't fit our position, it doesn't fit our personality. Certainly for young people today, they're far more relaxed in their communication. And just a marketing document really just, it wouldn't benefit from some overly business-like in many contexts. So
Yeah, it almost like you show up and you're a different person because you're not the person that's written down in the letter.
yes, you don't want that to happen. Absolutely.
Yeah. So you touch on a very good point because yeah, I've seen it where people just don't include the cover letter. And I feel like they're missing out on an opportunity to really market themselves in a different
Yes.
way from outside their resume, right?
So if I can touch on the cover letter, three things. Number one is it is not parsed by the applicant tracking system, so you don't have to worry about your keyword phrases in there. Number
Okay.
two is that increasingly applicant tracking systems, um, they want you to put everything in one file, so they want the letter with the resume, but you want to put the letter at the end,
Oh, okay.
not first, for applicant tracking score reasons. And you
Okay.
will find that some job postings or job submissions actually instruct you to put the cover letter after the resume. The third thing is that not every recruiter reads cover letters, but about 50% do read cover letters. So you still have to put some effort into it, because if you don't, then those that do read it, you've lost out on that. And you never want to give a recruiter any reason to discount you. And so from having a really well formatted, crisp looking resume that stands out in terms of the spacing and the way the appearance, so
Hmm.
you can look at some books for well designed resumes. It's not that it's fancy. I'm not advocating all kinds of graphics at all, but I, you can tell the difference between a resume I did and a self-written one most of the time, simply because my spacing is absolutely crisp. My bullets are all lined up. They're not jagging here and there. Uh, that sort of thing. It sounds so easy, but I can't tell you, like 90% of the ones I see are messy looking.
Hmm. Oh
Um,
yeah, no, and it just doesn't look right. And I'm with you
no.
100%. It just and it
Mhm.
it brings to mind if a person who doesn't put that much care or attention into their own resume, what's it going to
Mhm.
be like when they do their job? Which is the
Absolutely.
way I see it, because it's also a reflection, right? The amount of time and the amount of work that you put into your resume and your cover letter is going to tell me how much time and effort you're going to put into the work that you're going to do on a day to day, right?
Yes, and if you haven't put truly 110% into your resume to land you a great job that maybe pays you 80,000 or whatever a year,
Yeah.
then that's not saying too much about.
and
Yeah.
and I could see this, like, so it's a struggle, especially for the young people, right, that are out there looking for work. They're just done school, and it's a rush to get into the workforce. So the attention to detail, from what I've seen in my
Mhm.
own personal experience, isn't necessarily there, because they just kind of throw anything together and then they just apply to 100 different jobs with the same resume.
Oh, yes, that won't work today. That's why you really need to pick and choose which ones you really want to put in the time to finesse your application.
So this is good, because I want to spend a minute just on speaking about how do you choose, and with your experience and your expertise, how do you choose the right organization to submit your resume to?
Oh, that's a great question, because I've had a few clients who accepted and some of them are executive. It's not that it's young people right out of
Hmm.
university or college necessarily, accepted a job that really didn't pan out. The culture wasn't right. And it's a bit of a mixed bag. It's difficult to make sure that you're applying to companies that resonate with you. Obviously, when you're a new grad, you may have to take something that's not ideal in order to get your foot into that door.
Yeah.
But what I do with clients' resumes and cover letters is make sure that there's enough in language in there. And sometimes it's really a word here or there. It's not heavy handed at all, but a few words that speak to their style. Let's say the client is a real change agent, not wanting to work where they just like the status quo. I'm going to make sure that comes through because I don't want that client to even get interest from a company that wants you to just stick to their processes and not bring up any ideas and not move forward into the future with some bold vision. They don't want that. That client doesn't belong there. And so I do encourage people in their resumes to do that. If you love process and you love being given a methodology to follow and you don't want to tweak things and change them, that's perfectly fine. I'm not telling you that's a bad thing at all. Make that clear in your resume. That'll attract the kind of company or position that, or division or manager or whatever, that loves that kind of approach, needs that person in that role. But
Hmm.
if you're something other, then you've got to be honest and authentic and let the chips fall where they may. You don't want to attract attention from a company that you won't fit into.
Yes, and then yeah, no, absolutely. If you're new and like you need to get your foot in the door, so you can expose yourself to the hidden job market that's within that organization, as long as you like the organization.
Mhm.
But no, definitely, and incorporating that type of language and that type of value, your own personal values, into your resume and into your cover, definitely will
Yes.
help exclude you from being hired by the wrong people because they'll see it and hopefully they see
Yes. Yeah.
you, you
Yeah.
don't want to be working for the wrong person. It just kind of it just makes for a bad work experience, whether you're new or even transitioning from one place to another. You want to make sure that you land in the right place, and that's to me,
Yes.
that's actually even more important than the amount of money that you make because if you
I agree. I agree. I think that is because you'll be happier. And also, when you're ready to make a change, you'll have great information to add to you to update your resume. But if you work in a place where, oh, you really are not getting anything done because you go to the manager with ideas and you're always said, no, 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 you've got nothing to add to your resume.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, so this is fantastic. There's been a lot of good information that you shared with us today. Uh, is there is there more? So, are you running anything currently? You were talking about a couple of talks that you're going to be delivering. One in Kitchener. Do
Yeah.
you have any upcoming events where people can come see you live if they wanted to?
Well, the only one that's upcoming is the Communitech Job Seekers Group
Hmm.
in Kitchener Waterloo. Um, and that's on, I believe, September 11th at 1 o'clock. So they
Okay.
could Google up community job seekers. It is an open forum. You
Okay.
just have to connect with the organizers to make sure that they have room and so on.
Okay. And if they wanted to learn more about you and some of your services and where that's available, where can they go and get that,
Yep. My
Stephanie?
website is at newleafresumes.ca.
Okay. I'll make sure to include the link to your website in the show notes, to make sure that people can go direct. If people want to learn about you as well, can they go to your LinkedIn? Is that all right?
Yes, I'm there as well.
Okay.
Absolutely. They can connect with me on LinkedIn.
Terrific.
Mhm.
Okay, good. No, there's been a lot of good information. Like even for me to think about, and the big one that stands out for me is your resume is your business case on why an organization needs to hire you.
Mhm.
And that like it just talk about a mind shift. It's just like wow, okay,
Good, good.
that is really interesting.
Yeah, sometimes it just takes that little a different way of looking at something,
Mhm.
and all of a sudden, the resume is not just a boring old resume anymore.
No, yeah,
You
yeah,
know?
yeah. So a couple of other things, to make sure that you tell your story, you show your value. Don't use your headers and footers. So how do you? So I want to just go back to this one because I'm thinking, my audience members are probably thinking, then where do they put that information if it's not in the headers and the footers?
Just right into the Word document.
Okay. And would they
Yeah.
change the style? Like, would you make it bigger, smaller, similar to what you would do in a footer or header, or would you do it where
It
it
would look
all?
it would look the same, just that it wasn't in a header.
Okay. All
Yeah,
right.
absolutely. I'd like to make an offer to your listeners. I have
Sure.
a
Yeah.
handout that I typically reserve for my clients on applicant tracking systems,
Okay.
formatting do's and don'ts, and keyword ideas as well. So if they would want to email me at newleafresumes@gmail.com, I
Okay.
would be happy to send them out a PDF on
Okay. So I'll make
that.
sure. So newleafresumes@gmail.com.
That's right. And if
Okay.
they could tell me, they listened to me on your show and are following up on this ATS handout, I'd be happy to send it to them.
Terrific. I'll make sure I include that as well. No, and thank you for sharing that with our group. I know, especially a lot of the new Canadians, like it can be a struggle, especially when you're
Mm,
moving from one country to another, and things are getting really challenging here in North America. So having
mm.
the advantage of having, you know, how to get through the ATS is really going to give you an advantage over other people. So,
Absolutely, absolutely. And I have a great track record with new Canadian clients and help them land a job in their field. The IT guy that I spoke
mhm.
came from the Philippines to Canada, and he landed a job with a great employer within a few weeks. He was thrilled. I was too. It depends what field you're in, of course, whether it
Yeah.
happens that fast or not.
Mhm.
But it's definitely possible. Definitely.
Wow, that's terrific. So, thank you for your time today, Stephanie, and thank
You're
you for
welcome.
sharing, all your information with us. Like I mentioned earlier, I will be including all the links in the show notes. So, for those of you that are listening out there and you want to get access to Stephanie's ATS resume, I'm going to call it a cheat sheet essentially on how to properly format your resume. I'll make sure to include her email address. Just send her an email, let her know that you listen to the show, so you can grab your free copy of
Great. Yes.
that. So, Stephanie, thank you again for being on the show and for sharing your information with all of us. I know this is wow. Like my head's just it's spinning right now with all like I've got 3 pages of notes and I'm the one
Oh,
doing the show. So
well, you're very welcome. And I know I can get extremely passionate about this, but I've seen wonderful things happen for people. And like I said, I feel like I'm sitting on this secret. I think I need to write a book, John.
yeah, you should. And when your book is ready, let me know. We'll bring you back on the show, and you can
Okay.
talk a little bit about your book. It's
All righty.
definitely it's one of the things I learned from, and I had the opportunity and good graces of meeting Robin Sharma many years ago.
Ah,
And the one
mhm.
thing he wrote in his book for me was to leave a legacy, and
Ah,
it's part of the
yes.
reason why I wrote my own book
Right, right.
because now it
Ah,
sits in the Canadian archives and it's there for
wow.
forever. Right?
You've
So,
thrown down the challenge, John.
yeah. All right. All right, everyone. Thank you again for listening in. And Stephanie, thank you. Um, that is it. That's our episode for today. And we'll catch you next time.
Thank you for listening to the Zero to Hired podcast. Make sure you check out our website, www.zerotohired.com, and download your free resume template that's proven to get results, complete with examples and guidelines. Make sure you tune in as we interview leading industry experts who provide tips and strategies to help you get the career that's right for you.